morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Ray Orsini, and joining me, as always, sometimes is the actual
As
official co-host,
always,
as always, Mr. Matt Topper. How you doing, brother?
I think there's something wrong with the phrase "as always." Maybe as never, as quarterly, possibly.
We're
I'm
we're
not
trying to
used to it.
figure
We're
this
gonna be
out.
so off.
Oh, it's gonna be so rough. This is gonna be like day one when we were like first trying to figure out how to do the show. So we're trying to figure this out pre-show of when we were actually last on the show together, not counting the very first episode. So we think it's somewhere around February, March, definitely before GeekCon. But it means we've seen each other at GeekCon, we've seen each other at Secure. I imagine we'll see each other at ChannelCon soon.
I'm
We see
sure.
each other more in person than our regularly scheduled show. So
And every time we try to record something at these in-person events, that fails miserably too.
that's my favorite part. Yeah, Matt, so we're gonna be on site. Let's do some recordings. Yeah. We always say this. I love that Vicky and you are outside at Secure and the booths. Where we had the podcasting booths. You guys are outside, and I'm inside with Logan recording interviews with Pat and Bishop, and Patrick Beggs and everybody. And I'm doing these interviews, and we're so close in the podcasting area, and we still can't get time to get in front of a mic and camera together.
Yeah, it's
It's
it's just
great.
destined for failure. In fact, this may be a bad sign. Something is going to explode, or I'm a little worried about what might happen in the next hour. Actually.
And Josh, Dis Josh 23 in the chat, our very own MMN Discord's Josh, so who's been covered for both of us many a time on multiple shows, says this was pre-recorded separately and being stitched together by Simon and Danny. I think we need like when you do a Reddit AMA, like a proof of life, like this is live or something like that. Or we just leave them hanging. We just leave them guessing. We'll do it Inception style.
Yeah, we recorded this last week.
Yeah, now you have to figure out how we knew last week about the TeamViewer incident, which we are going to talk about. But Chris Henderson, the senior director of threat operations at Huntress, little company, they know a little something about securities. Since we couldn't get a security expert on the show, Matt, I wasn't sure if you were going to show. So Chris
I
is
see
going
how
to
it
join
is.
us later. Yeah. Chris is going to join us later. So you two smart guys in the security space, and I'll come in for comedic banter, can talk about what's going on with TeamViewer. You did mention right at the beginning, we had an awesome pre-show chat, which was fantastic. And of course was not
If only
recorded
we
live,
recorded it.
right, in advance. Like we would have been able to do it. But you brought up a good point. You said, my comment was nobody should be using TeamViewer. Like if you're using TeamViewer, this is your fault. And you appropriately mentioned we can't take that for granted. We still have to, do what we have to do. So we're going to cover that. That's a little teaser for later. We are going to cover, Chris is going to be on a little later in the show toward the end, and we'll talk about it. And you can tell me why I'm wrong for thinking you shouldn't be using TeamViewer to begin with. We have the chat
Notice my
popping.
silence.
Yeah. I know that even Matt, even though you work at ConnectWise, I know you personally use TeamViewer on all your properties. That's a joke, ladies and gentlemen. Please, that's a joke. So we got Keith Nelson. Ray Orsini never interviews me because I'm dumb and boring. No, Keith, it's because you say that you never show to events that I go to. Dean says Simon and Danny doing live e-girl deep fakes, but Ray and Matt models instead. Ooh, I don't know. Anyway, Danny, what's our first story, dude? We should probably get to the stories we're covering today.
This is more entertaining than any stories, actually.
You want to know? So as we've dialed in, MSP Dispatch is obviously our oldest show on the network, and as Tony and I have dialed in to account for scheduling changes and different formats and whatever, we had eliminated the banter in the beginning. We used to have a 2-minute spot of just BSing. Tony and I doing basically the same thing you and I do whenever we talk privately. So we shortened it for time because YouTube generally favors shorter videos. And the feedback we got from multiple people saying, you guys, we miss you being knuckleheads, in addition to the news. So there's value to this, sir. This is the content the masses want.
Well, don't you
Apparently.
worry. We can be knuckleheads when the stories come up. We will have plenty of opportunity like some kind of idiocy or some kind of wrong response that you guys can all make fun of us for.
All but guaranteed. All right, Matt. So this cyber attack breach communication. Read it off to me. Tell me why you brought it up.
Okay, so I'm not gonna. Oh, I brought it up because we needed stories right before the show.
I mean,
Um,
you're saying the quiet part out loud again, dude.
All right, so cyber attack breach communication. So this I don't think has anything to do with the TeamViewer incident. This is just they used the word, so I assume it was confirmed that it was a breach. I wanted to share a story that can interest you. They talked to a friend involving the revealing of a cyber attack in the role of a CISO. So without having to read this entire thing, um, they're asking about how they're communicating with clients during a breach.
So,
They're
I mean,
saying,
this
you know,
is
how
right
do
in
I
your
how do I
wheelhouse,
address
right?
this? What do I do with?
Well,
Ooh.
so let's qualify why, because your experience at comms and my experience at IR comms are going to be a little bit different, um, given our career paths. But you've been involved in the doing side, you've been involved on the planning side. My experience is relegated to the planning side. Um, so before we get into it, or as you get into it, I would like to hear from you the things you thought originally when you first started doing this versus what you know today is a better practice.
So I fell into, I would say, the same trap that many people or organizations starting do, and that is to trust your own judgment in the moment about what to do. And what I mean by that is comms are incredibly important during incidents and during, I having to stop myself from even saying the word during
Yeah,
breaches,
the bad word.
the bad word. And this is one of those things where it's critical to spend some planning time thinking about what your communication strategy looks like. And I mean that in two senses. One is the methodology. Maybe you're having some type of email, or maybe the client is having some type of email incident where email doesn't make sense anymore. Um, Maybe there's some type of, maybe they use a VoIP provider and the VoIP provider's having an incident. Phones don't make sense. Do you have alternate
Right.
comms? Things like
Okay, it's
that.
it's bad enough you're saying Voldemort with the breach word. Okay, you don't need to bring VoIP providers into this, sir. So,
What if the VoIP provider has a breach? Then
which
it's all
can
just down.
happen.
It
Yeah,
could.
actually, thankfully not me, but there was one of my competitors. Absolutely, I'm not going to call anybody out. It happened. It can happen and will happen to anybody. But one of my
Yeah.
competitors had exactly that, a vendor in our space. So it will happen.
So without turning this into like a monologue or some kind of like academic lecture, the takeaway here is spend some time now planning what your comms are going to look like and what you're going to say and how you're going to say it and who you're going to say it to and where it comes from, right? This all gets documented as part of your IR plan. And internally, you have an IR plan, and you also have one of how to deal with incidents at clients, right? There's a lot of legalities. You may need some representation from your legal counsel about what to say, what not to say, more importantly. And the whole gist of that question to me comes down to, did you take the time now to think about what you'll say later? Because guaranteed, you will say the wrong thing if you do it in the heat of the moment or without asking anyone or without asking your legal counsel or
Well,
insurance or anyone. Plan
it's
it.
like an RFO, right? A reason for outage. Our own term is major incident report. Boils down to the same. You would never give that important of a document or of an announcement just off the top of your head. You would never, ever, 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 ever do that, right? Because you're probably going to miss
Yes.
something, or you're going to misspeak about something, or you're going to say something you shouldn't have said. So, from the same risk and legal aspects, um, people need to look at this as exactly the same way. I agree with you. Since on the executive side only, which is where I've always been, um, the company always has a level of communications that is acceptable to the company. It doesn't matter if you're a 2-person MSP or a 3,000 person MSP. You have a company voice. You have company standards of what you will and won't say publicly. And then your attorneys are going to take whatever you would say and dial it down a lot. And then the insurance company is going to say even more and dial it down a lot. and you have to have everybody, because if you don't follow those things, all the protections those people are offering, right? Whether it's the FBI, whether it's the insurance company, whether it's the IR team that's actually coming in doing the forensics and helping advise on the response. If you don't do that stuff, then if you don't do what they say, you're undermining all the work they're doing, and sometimes putting it at a financial and a legal risk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and you're not going to think about any of that at the moment it happens, because your hair is going to be on fire and you're just going to be trying to get stuff done. That's why what Matt is saying is so important.
And if you don't plan it, your account manager or VCIO or whoever holds that hat in your org is going to send an email with the subject breach update.
And that is the moment the CEO is like, nope, I'm done, I'm out. I'm like,
you know it, right? We've seen stuff like that happen, or there'll be a phone call, or someone will post on Facebook, hey, we just got popped, where they'll say breach because they won't know to call it popped.
Right. Well, and so, and the conversation, and the reason I bring up the roles you and I have had coming through our careers is because the definitions of some of the descriptive words, and especially of the very specific words, the words that have meaning like breach, we use them. They're in a very qualified manner. A junior sysadmin, a junior tech is not going to do it. So it's different when we say it, and different when versus when they say it. But if anybody in the wrong audience hears it and they don't know who's qualified, what the qualifications are for saying it, they're going to assume the worst possible definition, which breach is,
exactly.
The doors are open, the data's out, and the wolf is in the hen house. Keith had some feedback in the chat. I want to make sure we address it. Let's see. Keith was saying, we just completed a cohort at RIT about event communication, crisis management, and interesting conclusions. We should have a how do you reply to questions about XYZ document somewhere? Going back to that company voice and permitted communications.
Yeah.
Dutch invasion. Damn it. We have this guy, Clevin Tegelerkirk, Stroopwafel. Clevin Stroopwafel says, my marketing team told me, as per my last email, is better than, I'm sorry for the miscommunication. And I know we're illiterate. I would have drawn you a picture. Yeah, I'm going to go with, listen to your team, please, sir. And then we got Keith from 1212 Communications helped us prevent the liabilities of a terror attack. Generally speaking, Matt, in any of your incident comms, have you ever put per my last email?
No, I've wanted to.
I would love to. And
I'm
with
just
that,
too nice to do it.
It would. There's the when I was at the police department, we used to have I worked 9/11 for my police department for years, and you have a mute switch on your headset, and there's always the thing you say while you're muted versus the thing you say when you're not muted. The equivalent of when the ticket comes in, your first response in your head of I know why you got this virus, versus when you talk to the client, hi, Mr. Moniker, thank you so much, no problem, we're going to take care of you, customer service voice.
The mute
With
button
that,
doesn't exist. There is no such thing.
once that email goes out, you're done. All right, so next story, Danny, what do we I think we've belabored this one a good bit.
We could always talk about it for longer.
We could. Dear idiots, the people responsible for the last email have been sacked. The previously addressed idiots, the people sacking the previous sacked people have been sacked.
Nice.
I don't know if it's art imitating life or vice versa, but there was a salesperson email going around the communities. That is all I'm willing to say on the air, and do not mention it in comments, please. But there was exactly that. It was a completely out of pocket email from a salesperson, and then an immediate response from the salesperson's leader saying that person is no longer with us. All right, Matt, story 2. What is this?
So I haven't read it besides reading the title, and it seemed like it would be a good topic. So we will find out together. Curious about this topic from both sides. From the MSP perspective, client of yours just hires an IT manager. So we're talking co-managed IT, I suppose. Had no other internal IT personnel. How does this make you feel? Ooh, that's an interesting one. From the client perspective, Are there any IT managers or directors here that have little to no internal IT personnel and interact mostly with an MSP? Interesting. I'll
I'm
talk from the
guessing.
MSP perspective first, I guess.
I always like to kind of qualify where I think the poster's coming from first. This screams to me somebody coming over from our sysadmin, or maybe a corporate IT background, not an MSP background. Um, I don't know. This to me, just the way the phrasing, some of the statements were made. Either this person has amazing EQ to put themselves in different people's perspectives, or this is not the perspective I've seen from a traditional MSP.
I wonder
Um,
what drove this question even being asked in the first place.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it reads as pulling discussion topics out of a hat as opposed to an actual question.
Oh, you think it maybe could be a marketing? It's one of the guerrilla
Oh,
marketers.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It could be.
yeah. It's a
I'm
good
just
it's a
curious
good
what
question,
the motivation
but
was.
yeah, it got us. So all right, so you're going to take the MSP's perspective. I'll take the client perspective. Go ahead, sir.
So when I had this happen, having it happen after the fact, after the relationship started, is a little strange. That usually wouldn't give me the greatest feeling. I would think that the client has some service issue that they're not telling us about, most likely. Either they're have feeling budget constraints, or they don't like working with us for some reason, or there's something going on like that. Um, that for some reason they're not communicating well during, or maybe we're not meeting with them enough to ask the questions. Maybe we are providing bad service. That could be very well be the case as well. Um, but when it's more before the contract starts and before the relationship begins, I actually like working with these accounts. It turns into um, me or whoever the person's account manager, the person's lead tech, and the internal IT working together on things, and that internal IT person can become your biggest asset, right? You end up not having to roll trucks to plug stuff in, or go deal with little things, or answer the how do I do this in the specific line of business application. So that I like. The thing that throws me in this question, though, going back to my original response, is having it happen mid contract or mid relationship is a big red flag for me. That's something that my spidey sense is going to go off and say, make me do some internal thinking. What's going on with this account that they're not happy about? It's kind of rare for this to come up partway through.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I'm a huge fan, like you actually. And some of the comments, like Dean pointed out in the chat, some of the comments actually lead to this. I'm a huge fan of having an internal stakeholder at the client, right? Like when I was the
Yeah.
MSP, if I had somebody that understood tech and understood what before, as I grew through my career, learning how to speak to executives, the business side of tech versus no, you need an RMM because you need to log in when your out of band management doesn't work. You can't have that conversation with your CFO or CMO or anybody else. So having an internal stakeholder at the org that understands that language with you and can help you clue you in on insights of what's going on and concerns, that's phenomenal. But it's the equivalent, like I agree with you. It's the equivalent. If we have an existing relationship already, we're already in contract. I would look at them bringing on internal IT no different than them bringing on a new LOB app without advising us, or bringing a new ISP without advising us, or even making decisions on what hardware they're buying without advising us. I would
Hmm.
look at it as there's a lack of communication there, and whether it's resulting in a lack of trust or anything else, it's a lack of communication without fail. Um, so, and that leads to the client side, right? So, looking from the client side, the question is, from the client perspective, are there any IT managers, directors that have little to no IT personnel and mostly interact with the MSP? I can tell you from my personal experience, absolutely. Um,
Most of them.
yeah, yeah, it's most of them, especially the bigger the company, the better. In my experience, co-managed has always boiled down to two things: either the client's IT team or a person or IT team is overwhelmed and needs boots on the ground, and plus the MSP is bringing their tools, which the client may not be big enough to afford minimum spend or get best in class. Now the MSP brings in that and the team for monitoring, and usually it's and the interaction is the MSP is augmenting all of these things for the overwhelmed in house IT. The other side, the other option is, which is the one I really, really, really enjoy, is when they have an internal IT director, but no worker bees. They have a designer, they have somebody that has vision, that knows what projects they want to get done, but that person is just delegating these projects. They want to delegate to the MSP, they want to delegate to another contractor, to whatever.
Yeah.
That IT director, and I love that IT director that understands budget, business need, and can get approvals. I love that person. That's my favorite person on the planet. Has there been a third option in your experience for commit? I mean, those are the only
So
two I've ever come across.
there's two ways though to look about this, and I'm curious what your experience has been in it. When we worked with someone who wanted us to augment by doing the heavy lifts and doing the projects and migrations and things, that has gone well historically, and maybe it's just us and the way we were set up for some reason. When we had clients that wanted us to be the L1 where they had internal admins doing projects, that like turned into fireworks. That just did not work at all. It turned into a lot of calls that came in where the answer was, well, we can't do anything and have to escalate to the internal admins. Have you seen one or the other work better?
Um, I personally, it's hard with Coma because you don't get to make all the decisions, which is why, again, I like it where they have the IT director, because usually it's authority to authority. So, it's a shared understanding, right? Versus a power dynamic of the worker bees and the MSP directing them. Um, as far as does one work better than the other, maybe. I mean, let's be honest, each one has their caveats, right? Like there's no version of,
Yeah.
maybe the internal IT director thinks, okay, well, because I'm delegating all these projects and they're high end projects and it's costing a ton of money, maybe I look at it and say, well, it's cheaper to bring in some interns, or it's cheaper to bring in some mid-tier people and just train them up and get rid of the MSP. If you got that thinker, they're going to think. That's a dangerous proposition. Versus if you have the or you have the client that just has the worker bees and you're giving direction and support and platform. If they're growing, at some point they're going to realize they can just manage that internally. They don't need you. So, and in both scenarios, just like what we talked about, pre-contract, post-contract, communication solves all. I've never seen one of these. I don't want to say never, like only the Sith deal in absolutes, right? But most scenarios, it is rare to me to find one of them where communication wouldn't have solved the problem to begin with. And I
Yes.
know that
That
seems
was my
very
big
like,
takeaway.
I know that's very couples therapist thing, but it's the truth of it. It's true. You, whether you communicate by setting boundaries and setting expectations, or you communicate by expressing need, or you communicate, by discussing what the plans are long term and what you're thinking about, so give the other person the opportunity to give their feedback. Because if they don't value their feedback, you're not communicating in the way that has established trust. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like the presidential debate, but it's, you know what I mean. But but you get what I'm saying. If you're not communicating, they're not trusting you, and then everything kind of unravels after that.
This is such a good point. If you get blindsided by a client hiring internal IT, like we talked about, coming as a surprise, it would be weird for me. Take some opportunity to think, are we communicating at all? Like, what happened to the relationship that this is a surprise to us? We're probably not talking enough. Chances are, if they're unhappy about something, you don't know about it, and really do some self reflection. It's really natural for us, or for me at least, to say, "Oh man, the tech's cheap. They're looking to fire us. They're looking to fire us, or any of that." How did you get to that point? And it's worth taking some time to answer that, to see if you have this issue at other clients as well.
And I like to look. You can call them challenges. You can call them mistakes. You can call them whatever. I like to look at everything as an opportunity for improvement, even when the house is on fire. Even if the client's saying, "I'm walking out the door," you can still use that opportunity to everybody's benefit. Of, okay, look, I get we got here. I'm not going to try to convince you not to leave. can you tell me what I did wrong? Can you give me some insight how I can help the next person to hopefully not get them to the point where they have to leave their trusted MSP? Like, if you practice a little humility, you'd be surprised what you can get out of a client, even if they feel like they need to tell you just to get you to stop asking them this damn question. Similarly, if the client hires, a new IT director while you're MSP, first of all, you're not going to win that argument of you don't need them. Once it's done, it's done. Realize you're never going to argue. You're never going to win the argument with your friend about his ex-girlfriend/girlfriend. You're not going to win.
Yeah.
So, like, realize your place. But you can say, look, okay, this is interesting. It's not how it's normally when we have these kind of changes. We like to communicate them in advance and plan them out so we can make sure you get the best result possible. What you're looking to accomplish. Can you, since we're coming at a deficit, can you fill me in on what you were thinking here so we can make sure we work best together? Show the client you're not scared of this. Show the client you're still willing to work together. Show the client you realize there maybe have been a lack of communication and you can improve it.
Or just literally ask, what did we do wrong? And, just hang up and listen, and the client will vent for the next half hour.
Yeah, maybe that's the best. Maybe that's the best advice. Not the ask what we did wrong. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. The shut up and listen. One of the things I've been doing over the past year, because you and I have a challenge of knowing when to stop talking, because we get so passionate, right? Is I'll be talking and I'll ask a question. I mute myself locally. You guys have all seen that. Oh, Ray is muted. But I'll mute myself locally to stop me from interrupting the person. If you ask a question, you want to hear their response.
Yes.
And that's a nice teaser.
Yeah. Don't argue. Don't fight it. Like, it's not, you're not asking to debate them. You're asking as a genuine question.
Right. If you're going to sit there and argue back, don't bother asking it that. You're just burning bridges at that point. So speaking of questions we want to ask, there's a big question in the MSP community. I don't know if it's the same question everybody has. My question is, why the hell are you using TeamViewer? Matt's question may be, what can we do to protect ourselves, or how should we be communicating? To answer some of those questions and more, we have brought on a very special guest, Mr. Chris Henderson, the Senior Director of Threat Operations at Huntress. Dude, you're getting ConnectWise level titles at this point. One day you're going to be a 12th name title like Jeff Bishop. How you doing, dude? Oh, can't hear you. No worries. While he's getting his mic taken care of. So I had asked Chris to come on because they're doing Huntress every time one of these events. And there's lots of people in the community that will go post on Reddit what they're seeing, how it's, what they're seeing, how it's, how we should act, what's being affected. And one of those companies that does it most often is Huntress. So they were the first ones I reached out and said, hey guys, what are you doing? Can you come on and talk? And Chris, thankfully said yes. Chris, you said the test worked. You have to pull a Ray. I'm the one that's always muted.
Can you hear me now?
You did jinx it.
Oh, we got you.
All right, there we go. I'll use my headphones instead of the fancy mic.
You sound good, man. It's all good.
Yeah, sounds fine.
Awesome.
Yeah. User error. See, even the best text in the world, user error, man. It happens. Chris, how you doing, dude?
Doing well. Yourself? Thanks for having me.
Good. Thanks. I see your platinum plaque in the back. I have mine over here in the corner too. I love it.
Yep.
So we'll jump right to it. TeamViewer, you guys have, I don't think I'm underestimating, hundreds of thousands of endpoints that you guys are covering between the MSPs and their clients and corporate. So you have visibility even to clients that maybe you're using TeamViewer, or when this stuff comes up, this is why your input is so valuable, because you guys are seeing this at a macro scale. So to dial it back for anybody that may not have seen this up to now, first of all, you're welcome, because this is nonsense. It's crazy. Chris, can you briefly describe what is it that TeamViewer announced is going on, and as of your understanding, so we can qualify.
Yeah. So anybody who hasn't seen the news, so TeamViewer, they announced they had a security incident on the 26th. They had a credential used to their corporate environment by one of their employees. According to their latest post, this was a non-admin employee right? And so from what we know, or rather been told, largely have to, take their word at it, which there's no reason not to. But so non-admin account to corporate environment, no access to the production environment. And so, right, largely this is going to be a test of how good are the role-based access controls over at TeamViewer, and do they have proper segmentation of their employees from their corporate IT environments over to production. But yeah, no, right now there's not a, we're not seeing mass exploitation against the TeamViewer clients or anything. And largely I look at this as a good fire drill for everybody, right? Like this could have been something significant. It's not seeing so yet, but it's a really good shot to like understand how quickly can you assess in your own environments? Like, are you running TeamViewer? Do you have your inventory set up in place of like, how much time is it going to take you to go and assess, where's TeamViewer running in my environment, my clients' environments, but also using this as a nice reminder of like, go and assess all of the remote access tools you do have in your environments and kick out any of the ones that your employees have installed or your clients' employees have installed that are not yours, right? Like TeamViewer, lots of people use it to set up sort of shadow IT access to their own machines from home. And so, we saw this all the time where it's people setting up this backdoor access because it's, I want to make it easier for me. And so I want to access my, my work computer. And so I think it's a good shot right now, just while we're waiting for more information. Go run those inventories, see, where is this installed, and really check, do you need it there, and remove it if not. And then, we're largely in a waiting game right now.
So let me ask you questions. When I was at the Miami Police Department, working down when there, we had very specific rules as to what we could and could not say, or what we could and could not say of for any kind of incident that was going on. One of the whether it was descriptions of offenders or suspects, or whether it was descriptions of incidents or relaying sensitive information. So yay HIPAA! I've been laughing at CPNI for 30 years.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring that up is because in the police department, one of the going back to descriptions of suspects, unless they've confirmed, you can confirm somebody has a weapon, you can never say they don't have a weapon. That is the rules for when you're giving a descriptor of a suspect. You will never say they are not armed. Because that creates a possibility of safety that you have no qualification for. You don't know. So one of my so in that light, one of the first things that raised a red flag for me with the TeamViewer incident is that they said very specifically this was in their corporate network, did not affect any of the other tools, any of the other packages, anything, any of the content delivery, any of that. So early on, they just announced this 2 days ago, to make such a, this is reminiscent of Steve Ballmer saying Windows XP is the most secure operating system ever when it hasn't been tested yet. How can you say that? That to me, I wouldn't treat it any differently than if they had confirmed something had affected their systems publicly. I would still treat it as it's an infected being. I have to remove it from my systems. Am I over exaggerating the response here? I mean, what do you see?
I think it depends how critical is it to your business operations, right? Like, what is the impact it's going to make to your business to go and remove TeamViewer from everywhere? If this is the primary tool that you're using to access your clients, sort of neutering your own ability to deliver service in response to this, right? That's a risk-based decision that you're going to have to make. But when you look at the statement that they made, you're right. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, is what we like to say. And so, presumably, if they're making these statements, they have adequate logging controls that they should be able to say, no, we do have logs that would show if they had accessed those environments, and perhaps those logs are empty. But also, they also could just be making that statement based upon their understanding of RBAC that they have placed within their own environments, where, oh, well, we know that this person doesn't have access, therefore there's no risk. If that's what they're basing this off of, that's definitely jumping the gun before they've done their full investigation.
Well, my first thought is,
real quick, Matt, if you don't mind. That's funny because that goes back to the communication thing you and I were talking about before Chris came on. If they would have said, we do not believe it has breached any of our other systems or crossed into any of our other systems, to not use the B word, based on our pre-existing security controls, or based on, I get they're not going to be super transparent about architecture, but we have thought about this and already addressed this, and that's why we're making the statement. I think that would come across a lot more. I would take that with a lot more value and with a lot more credence. Matt, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you're totally good. I take them at their word that they don't have any evidence that the threat actor directly address or access their production network. But I start jumping to, is there anything on the corporate network like source repositories or secret storage or something like that that can later be used to pivot into the production network, right? That's my bigger concern than, yes, okay, you're telling me what you think I want to hear because there's no direct access to prod from here, but I might be able to get in later.
Yeah, understanding like what systems were impacted. Given the brevity of the response, my initial assumption that it was like a SaaS app, some SaaS app credential got popped, right? And it's and their understanding is that it's not corporate, or it's not tied to production, just due to whatever access they found. But yeah, without further details as to what exactly was accessed, it's really hard to run that risk assessment as an individual or a consumer of the product to know, what latent risk still exists, even though you've done containment and remediation. There's still, potential for further on action, or if they grab additional credentials.
Right.
Matt, asking you've been closest to being an actual MSP of the three of us. You probably beat me by a few minutes.
Most recently, at least.
Most recently. But having been in the MSP seat, and definitely having had the security role, you see something like this, weighing the risk versus reward that Chris is talking about. Am I severing my only remote access? How painful is that going to be? Do I have another option? Put your MSP hat on. Where would you land on that risk reward? Like, what would be your response? MSP Matt, not working for any other vendor Matt.
Yeah, fair. MSP Matt, if TeamViewer was my remote access tool of choice and this came down based on what we know so far, I don't think I would pull it yet. It would be too disruptive to my ability to deliver service to be able to make that call. Now, that does mean we have to keep a much, much closer eye on it. And to Chris's point before, going through the asset list and software inventory, and if I have users out there backdooring into their own systems, they're getting a nice conversation, and stop doing that. For my own use, though, I would not be pulling TeamViewer at this point. I'd be waiting to hear that there was something more nefarious going on, or that there was evidence that something happened beyond just a corporate network access. We kind of have to take them at their word for now, with the eyebrow raised.
Yeah, but I think looking and ensuring you don't have additional admins created. What are all of the signs that you would see from your administrative pane of TeamViewer? Looking at, do you have proper monitoring on the systems? Do you also have TeamViewer on? Right? Do you have an EDR, or are you sending those logs to a SIM? And do you have the ability to sort of heighten the observation you have around those systems, just in preparation for if this does turn worse? But also, do you have the ability to, or have you staged the ability to quickly update those if needed as well?
So I imagine, you guys are always monitoring stuff like this. You guys, when it's a very big incident, you guys will generally start posting blogs and track it. And we've always pin it on our MSP. So there's already threads on this as we're discussing.
Yep.
As in terms of the Huntress clients, those MSPs servicing those hundreds of thousands of endpoints, is Huntress giving any advisement now, official advisement on what to watch, how to proceed, that kind of thing?
We're in a similar place as to what Matt was saying, right? We've gone through, we have the checks on our back end to see who has this installed, if we need to very quickly pivot and start sending alerts out to our customers that they have vulnerable versions. And so we are staged if we need to stand up a rapid response and go into the community engagement the way that we have in the past. We're certainly ready. It's just we haven't seen something that warrants that at this point yet.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Chris,
course.
I want to be respectful of your time. Matt, same as well. We're going to cut a little early because we have bits and books coming on after this. So we want to give you a little breathing room if any of the MSPs are going to stay and watch that. Chris, we'll put your contact information in the show notes below if anybody wants to follow you or Huntress on LinkedIn, Reddit, everywhere else you guys are at.
Cool.
V Huntress on MSP Geek. Is there anything you guys are doing or anything you're doing personally coming up you may want to promote?
What are we doing? We just finished up a big webinar yesterday for the 2024 Cyber Threat Report. Go check the recording of that out if you haven't seen it. It really goes into detail around what we've seen from a threat actor standpoint, which ransomware families are still winning, all within the SMB and healthcare and manufacturing focus.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris. Matt, what about you, man? What do you got coming up?
So what I have coming up is finally a break from traveling for a couple of weeks, I think, until ChannelCon. So that's fantastic. Vicky and I are doing quite a bit of work on the IT Nation podcast, which is an intentionally not ConnectWise production. It's all about just featuring anyone in the channel who has useful advice to give. So that's been a lot of work, or a lot of success so far. Check that out. And working on what we're doing at ChannelCon right now.
And that is awesome. We will absolutely include the link to in the show notes for Vicky and Matt's IT Nations podcast. We will absolutely include the links for the webinar Chris was talking about as well. And like you, I'm not traveling for like 30 seconds and I'm appreciating it and enjoying it. So, whatchamacallit, I will absolutely not promise that we will be here next Friday because it's the day after 4th of July and we have not thought that far ahead. But if we do, we look forward to seeing you. And if not, you guys already know what to expect. Anyways, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other and uninstall TeamViewer. No, I'm kidding. Bye.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.